Наш следующий доклад будет на английском, so I'm going to talk English too. And please welcome Dominika. Anthropologist and UX researcher from Warsaw, Poland. And Dominika is going to talk us about research, anthropology, and HCI, and so on. Please welcome.
Hello. So I, as I was introduced, my education is anthropology, and I also graduated from theater studies. But I work in the completely different field of technologies, and I will speak about how these two different disciplines combined. And I will start with explaining what actually anthropology is, because we can go to next slide. Next slide. Oh, yeah. So what is anthropology? Anthropology, as I've heard, and it's what is usually associated with, is the study of ancient people. Well, I don't know how it works in the Russian language, but in Polish and English language, anthropology is sometimes confused with archaeology, which is researching on ancient people, but anthropology is also very complex, but it doesn't have to do anything with researching on ancient people. It actually researches on unknown people. And the roots of anthropology are connected with traveling to faraway destinations. And this discipline started approximately in the 19th century and was founded in the 20th century. But the way of thinking started much earlier. So as a science, it was introduced in the 20th century, but the way of thinking, of imagining people, of trying to find out what other customs, what other traditions are, started much earlier. For example, even before people started to travel to different destinations, they imagined people living in faraway territories as huge people, as very wild people. So anthropology didn't really start with traveling. It started with curiosity. And so this is the very first foundation of my discipline, is the study of the unknown and is the study of curiosity. So as a scientific discipline, it also has very different definitions. It's in the HCI and UX. Many methods of anthropology are used. For example, field studies, interviews, observation. Yes, but sometimes anthropologists didn't work with going to faraway places. As for example, Ruth Benedict didn't research on Japan while going there. She researched on Japan while reading about Japan. So anthropology is also about changing your perspective and trying to imagine the perspective of the person you are not to. You aren't. So, but in the title of my lecture, I didn't mean the anthropology as science. I meant the anthropology as the way of thinking as everybody can do, and especially in the business, in design process, everybody should try to switch to a perspective of what is called in the HCI a user, and what is called in other sciences, social scientists, another person. The very big difference between anthropology and HCI is that in HCI and user experience, users are called users, and in anthropology, they are just called people. So, next slide, yeah. So this is what is usually anthropology associated with. And this is actually a picture taken in the 20th century by Claude Lévi-Strauss when he was traveling to South America and researched on some tribal people. And in these times, traveling to Southern America wasn't like right now that I book a ticket and I just go tomorrow and I stay with Airbnb. So he was found there as this discipline, not only because he just went there, but because he used another methods to find out what these people are like. He stayed with them and he learned these languages and he tried to use another values to understand them. The very hard thing about anthropological thinking is the attempt to understand that people are different values and they are very different. The patterns of thinking, not only comparing these kind of people and Western people, but also people who, like different people who live in Saint-Petersburg, for example. They can have completely different names. They can have completely different values and habits. So this is what usually the first picture shows anthropology. This is usually what is connected with HCI, and this looks completely different. But actually, the difference is just the techniques. So, like what is HCI and UX usually associated with are the methods and the laboratories and the very big vocabulary built on this discipline. So, but sometimes I really miss that the very first basics for the discipline is missing, that people don't really question, like following all these rules and methods and methodologies. They just forget that they try to find out of who are their users, who are their clients, and they just sometimes people researching on technology forget that they research not on their own needs, they research on somebody else's needs, which can be very different. So, can we go next? Yeah, so, for example, let's take this website. It doesn't seem like a very good website, right? This is like some random website took from the web. So, we are thinking with our standards or the standards we are used to or the rules. But the very big question, the very first question while judging this website or designing this website is that not what are my needs, what I'm looking at this website, if I like it, if it's nice for me to use. Who is this person who uses this website? Is this aesthetics of this website coherent with what they see every day? What kind of music do they listen? What video shows do they like? What else do they do on the internet? When trying to build the so-called persona, so the character of your user, you should really think of their life as whole, as coherent. So not only focus on the very narrow part of design, and in my opinion, there's nothing like good design or bad design. This must be used for this, the design must be transparent for the person who uses it, not transparent for us. I can imagine a person who goes to this website and feels, I feel home. And this should be the goal of a designer, of an interface. I can imagine people who enjoy bureaucracy. So I can imagine people who enjoy complicated structures. So if you forget, if you really stick to the rules, you can really miss the point. So I give you another example. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so this is like a building in Belgrade. So imagine I stayed in a building in Belgrade while traveling, and I used Airbnb, and to enter the door to my building, they gave me some key, and the key never worked. It just never worked. It was one of the keys that you just come and you try to move this key to the right and left, and it just doesn't work, and you stay there for 10 minutes until somebody else comes, and then they open it in 1 minute and you don't know, and you feel like an idiot, and then it happens all the time, and you never do this. So I stayed in this building, and the longest time was 2 hours until I waited. I never managed. So somebody showed me how to do this, but I could never follow this until I learned. So later on, I learned how to do this, and it seemed to me invisible after 1 month. It was just me who stayed in this building as Airbnb. The other people lived there for 20 years. They never had a problem with opening this door. The question is, was this UX good or bad? It was bad for me, but for them, it was invisible. It was transparent. So only for my perspective, it was complicated, but for them, it would be more complicated to change this key, and it would more complicate their lives because they already knew the way. So next slide. Yeah, so this is type of business. When I was going to Belgrade from Bosnia, I was coming with BlaBlaCar, and the driver stopped. There were several shops with watermelons. There are just several. This picture is from some, I guess, like this guy is Pakistani, but this watermelon culture is very strong in the Balkans, and there's like people are obsessed with buying the best watermelon ever and with the best price. So this is it's not only about watermelon, it's about being a good Balkan person. Anyway, we were going and we were stopping each watermelon station. And this guy, it wasn't just like he went there and he brought one watermelon. He went there, he spoke to one salesman, and they had a conversation for 15, 20 minutes, and then he resigned. Like there were 100 watermelons to choose. So finally, he bought one. It wasn't about the price. It was about a conversation of one of these watermelon salesmen. So, because I had lots of time, so I was thinking, what is the secret of this guy? And I believe that be it a big corporate or be it small shop owner, is always a business. So why do you think? Why these people don't need any system design? Why? What is the difference between an owner of a big corporate business or a big global company and this kind of people? So the answer is in anthropology, because these people, they don't have to learn about their users. They meet their users. All the users are the same. Their users are themselves. So they don't need to learn, they don't need to research, they don't need to imagine. They are the users. So sometimes I think that also there's a new myth in UX research that every design, every type of business must have a UX department. I don't think so, because I think that in a very homogeneous societies, the business owners, the creators, know much better than, for example, us. We couldn't design a watermelon shop. They just know. But when you are designing for somebody you don't see, for somebody you are not, then then you need to imagine his or her perspective. Can we skip? Yeah, so like compared to like while HCI is human-computer interaction, the anthropology would be human-human interaction. But while you interact with computer, you also interact with people who are behind this computer, so it's always human-human interaction. And I would suggest that human-centered process, the design process, should be just replaced with human-centered being. And I would like to tell more, but it's sometimes it's more about having good intuition and being sometimes a good conversation would give you much more than a very detailed interview. So sometimes you should stop being so much researcher and methodologist and use your inner sense and just be more human. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominika. And have we any questions? Yeah, sure.
Hello. So, sir, can we go back to the slide with the guy with the watermelons? So, yeah, my question is, didn't you think that about this person who's selling watermelons, it's not about selling watermelons at all. It's about selling the experience. Since you know it's a big part of Balkan culture, it's a part of the overall Eastern and maybe Oriental culture to kind of trade when you sell something. Like, how much is this watermelon? 100 rubles. 100 rubles? No way. It's not more than 50. No, like, etc. Like this. So maybe it shouldn't be about watermelons at all. It should be maybe about, maybe the point here is selling the experience. And if he's selling the experience, maybe it's not that UX is not needed for him. Maybe here it's just in some kind of different field. Like, not about selling the goods, but selling experiences. Maybe that's the thing.
Well,
thank you.
I think that in fact he does use their experience, but he doesn't do it consciously, so he doesn't really think of how to sell it. He just does what he used to do and what his father used to do, and it's another way. But what I was trying to say, that it's not necessarily needed. I can't imagine an agency he hires who would advise him how to haggle with. Can you imagine, like, you come to him and you say, oh, you should try to sell your experience. You should try, like, he wouldn't understand it. So sometimes it doesn't have to be about watermelons, but sometimes there are very narrow and very small fields when the owner speaks the language of the client better than somebody, a third party. So that was actually the point of the slide.
Thank you. Any other questions? As Jakob Nielsen have written one time, if you are designing websites, then you are unusual man by default, so do not design for yourself, something like this. Yeah?
Oh, is it a question?
No, it's not a question, it's just a side notes. But any other questions? No, okay. So thank you very much, Dominika, thank you.